What do most Fortune 500 executives have in common? They learned important lessons on the fields and courts of their high school and collegiate sports teams. This is true for both men and women. Ernst & Young found that a whopping 94% of women holding a C-suite position played sports. Their wins and losses shaped their habits and who they would become. Join me on my journey to sit with some of the brightest executives in the world as we discuss how sports shape their professional trajectory. In partnership with Chief Executive Magazine, the voice of America's CEO community, I'm your host, Don Yeager, and this is Corporate Competitor Podcast. When 10-year NBA veteran Charles Smith was playing for the Los Angeles Clippers, San Antonio Spurs, and New York Knicks, he earned acclaim by being a top rebounder and shot blocker. Still today, Charles ranks in the NBA's top 1% of all-time shot blockers. Little did he know that his knack for disruption and versatility would extend well beyond his athletic career in his efforts to help others. Today, he is a master facilitator for Fierce Inc., a global leadership development and training powerhouse with a client roster including Apple, Coca Cola, and HBO. Charles facilitates training programs that not only help athletes better transition into corporate America, but also help businesses understand and leverage pro sport team mentalities and teamwork dynamics to build a high-performing group and organization in scale.
Have the hard conversation. Think about those people that you did not have the hard conversations with. Those relationships are not as strong as they could be today. When you don't have that hard conversation, you are destined for a negative impact with that person. When you have the hard conversation, it gives you an opportunity to have a positive impact. That interpersonal connectivity that you make meaningful with people, that makes all the difference in the world.
Charles, thanks for joining us.
Hey, glad to be here. Thanks for that warm intro. Looking forward to it, so thank you.
The best part about doing this opportunity is to learn so much about the people we get a chance to interview. I had a chance to look at details from Harding High School in Bridgeport, Connecticut. Everybody would know you're a basketball player, but you also ran cross country.
Yeah.
Now, in your junior season of basketball, team had a perfect 28-0 record, and you beat your rival for the state championship.
Right.
It's tough to go undefeated in anything. We know it. But what did you learn along the road to staying unbeaten that year?
Well, not to mention that we had just an awesome team. We were very talented, but it was the work we put in. You mentioned cross country. You couldn't play or try out for our basketball team unless you ran cross country. That gave us an edge, regardless of who we played against, because we were better conditioned than any high school team that we played. We would run cross country in meets.
That had to be kind of odd in cross country, bringing a bunch of guys well over 6 foot tall to a track meet.
Yeah, it was interesting. Now, practice for cross country, the miles we ran after school and then come into the gym and play, we did that 5 days a week. We're young kids. We don't know any better. We're listening to the coach and our bodies are able to withstand it. We didn't run cross country to win cross country meets. We ran cross country to get in shape. But we started competing with each other who would get across the finish line first. By default, we were competing with the other teams. So when exhibition season came to play against other schools, we were just running nonstop, players coming in and out, and that was our coach's style. So we were prepared better than most.
So that's interesting. I did notice that when I was looking at your school, Charlie Bentley was your high school coach in both basketball and cross country.
Mm-hmm.
And what a great cross training lesson that is for all of us, right? When we're start thinking about business and other areas, that it's really great if you want to excel in one thing, but what might be another place or skill set you can go work to develop that will in fact make you better where you are?
You want to always be in a position and be prepared to excel. when I started at Midas Exchange in business development. I was prepared because that's what I did prior to working for them. I did an entrepreneurial side. So what was interesting is that they asked me to make cold calls and start setting up meetings for the company. I knew about my resources. After the third day, it was a waste of my time. I was prepared to do better, but they didn't know that. So I went to the partner and said, why don't we do the reverse? Why don't you give me the name of the person that you want to meet with and which company? I'll set up the meeting. And they looked at me like, what? I knew the relationships I had and what I've done before I went corporate. So within a week, I was setting up the meetings exactly with the individual, with the company nationally, and who they wanted to work with. I utilized my contacts and resources.
So you were figuring out how many degrees you were removed from someone and working through your chain to get those connections made.
Exactly. So I became head of new business in a short period of time. That's the same as like we were talking about the analogy with cross country. I was prepared when basketball season started. I was prepared when I got into business development.
Right.
Those are the little nuggets and the things that are transferable along the way.
Yeah. I noticed that in your senior year, you won the state championship again.
Mhm.
We talked about winning once is difficult, being undefeated, difficult. Winning back to back is really a challenge, which is why we don't see it happen as often. What was it that the coach was able to do to help you all maximize your talent in that senior year?
That's a great question, Don, and I can probably talk about that for an hour. You look at the coach coaching me as a athlete, you look at the CEO managing his C-suite team as an executive. They're both leaders in their own right and they're both trying to win. What the coach did for me in high school is to understand the talent that he had as a team. A high school player with me, his name is Warren Bradley. He ended up going to Cleveland State. I can remember like yesterday, the coach saying in practice, Warren, there's not enough shots that everybody's going to get. You're going to have to get it off the backboard and you're going to have to get the putbacks if you want to score some points. Get it off of offensive rebounds. Well, Warren became one of the top offensive rebounders at Cleveland State when they went to the Sweet 16. He didn't like it, but that's how he was going to score. So as a coach, he knew the talent we had and he pulled it together to give everybody their roles for us to be successful. And we stuck to our roles. When some players were not satisfied, it was up to him to give them that extra nugget and put them in a position to make that person happy. And it keeps the team happy. Now, as an executive wants to build a dynasty, but doesn't know how. It's a different paradigm being in sports and being executive at a corporation. Executives talk about team all the time, but I don't believe that C-suite executives really know what team is all about.
Yep.
Their idea of team does not include accountability. I see that a lot. And accountability is so huge, mainly because the video doesn't lie. You're being recorded on everything that you do, right?
Yes.
So imagine if in corporate, you were being recorded on everything that you do.
Mhm.
That would force people to be accountable. The fact of the matter is, there are executives that have been in sports that do understand accountability that still struggle dealing with their team and their employees because in corporate, everybody's used to passing the buck. It's a great parallel, and I talk about it all the time. And I love the fact that you get coaches that want to hear the dynamics of what makes a corporation successful and the C-suite executive successful. And then you want to hear C-suite executives that want to understand what makes a coach very successful.
Right.
Can Pat Riley go run American Express? Can Ken Chenault run a team in Miami Heat? They would love to do it, but there's a lesson learned in between both. It's pretty amazing.
And that ability to actually learn that lesson could make both of them better leaders wherever they are.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's why I love talking about it. I could talk about that for an hour.
So it's funny, a lot of companies do, in fact, describe their organizations as teams. We know, truthfully, most of them aren't teams, right? They're a bunch of sole proprietors working for their own best interest as opposed to the interest of the collective.
I'll give you an example. I work with a sales group. We were all pulling the same rope to get to a common goal, an objective that we had as a group, at least I thought. And when you come down the stretch, you start to find out who didn't pull their weight. Why are we slacking now as we're getting to the end goal of our mission? Why did this person not do X? Why did this person not do Y? Why wasn't this person on time when we needed them at this point coming down the stretch? Because they were able to do it. They were able to hide. And they were able to shuffle their work towards someone else. You do all these things. You can't do that in sports.
Right.
If I mess up on the floor, Charles Oakley would be the first to say, see, get your butt over there, quick dialogue. In corporate, if you mess up, you got microaggressions, you got all these different things you got to deal with and how to talk to somebody because their feelings get hurt. You're bullying, it's a microaggression, and why is he mad?
Yeah.
It's a matter of learning effective communication and understanding the connectivity with the human being to build trust. The Harvard Business Review put out a periodical that said 73% of employees don't trust their boss. There's a reason for that.
Mm.
It's not me saying it. This is data that's public knowledge. These are things that executives need to learn, and there are things that coaches need to learn, all about effective communication. We all have skill sets that make us really good at what we do. We have skill sets that make us great at what we do. But what about that 20% margin? If I'm 80% great at what I do and I want to be greater, live in that 20% margin where you're flawed. You move that needle just 1%, you've accomplished something great.
So it's funny. There's a lot of folks who talk about be better in your sweet spot. You're suggesting go identify that area where you're flawed and spend time in that zone, growing and getting better.
I mean, how do you become great at what you do? How does a team build a dynasty? It is that margin of deficit where you're not good at something that you need to improve. See, we all as leaders have egos. Those egos help us excel to an extent because the ego can also get in the way when you're dealing with other individuals. It's hard for a person that is very successful to stretch themselves to go in an area that they're not comfortable with, the area where you don't know. You know what you don't know what you don't know. So you don't really want to jump into that pool because you're great at what you're doing anyway. If you want to be greater and you want to build a dynasty and you want to be the best at what you do, live in that flawed margin and grow there.
I love it. The margin of your flaw. That's awesome. There's so much discussion around that, which is the place to go put your focus. That's strong. And clearly, given your success, that's powerful perspective. As you were growing as a basketball player, what for you was that area? I love your phrase, flawed area, that you had to go work on consistently in the off season.
You know, when I look back at my sports career, I did not do all the things that I needed to do to be great. I was so young that I kind of progressed on raw ability. I didn't work as hard as I should have during the off season because I was good enough during the season. I was a starter my entire career. When I read things about Kobe Bryant's Mamba mentality and different things like that, I had that, but I didn't execute.
Mhm.
I tended to use my off season to execute on business and other things away from the sport because I knew I had that. So if I had to do it all over again, I would work a lot harder in the off season on increasing my talent level for sport. But now I increase my business acumen on the other side of things. And I'm blessed to where I am today because having that knowledge at a young age and building upon it helped me to sit in front of you today and be able to give certain knowledge and feedback in areas where most can't. There's a give and take there, but we live and we learn.
Yeah, there's just so many places I want to jump with you. This is crazy. One question I want to ask is that you went to Pittsburgh, amazing career there. I know your son plays there now.
Yep,
And during your time at Pittsburgh, there was a coaching change that occurred.
yep.
Two coaches, Roy Chipman and Paul Evans. Obviously, anytime a disruption like that occurs where a leader is gone and a new leader is in place, there's just so many dynamics that suddenly run into play. Can you tell me a little bit about what you saw in each coach that you then took into your life, even off the court?
That's interesting because I kind of use this analogy, and these two were perfect for this particular analogy. You can be on a team with Roy Chipman, and he could say, fellas, look out that window frame and look amongst the visual that you see and tell me what you see. The starting five will say five different things. A couple things might be similar. Roy Chipman's response would be, that's interesting. I saw some of the things that you saw, and I saw some things that were different. But I like everything that all you guys saw. And he move on. Paul Evans would say the same thing, and everybody would say something different. And he'll say, what? You didn't see this and you didn't see that? Oh, come on, guys. You got to see that. There's a different style there.
Right.
And it's more dictator versus participating. That was the difference. And I had to adjust to Paul Evans' my way or the highway kind of style. And it was a great adjustment. And I appreciate him being the way he was today, because you're not going to go through life and not have different types of leaders that you work with and work for.
Mm.
He taught me how to deal with that person in business or in sports when I came across him.
Wow. I love it.
And Don, life is full of information that you carry throughout your life and you build upon it. There's mentors, there's your spiritual gifts, there's your discipline. I look back at when I was in high school, I was the only freshman that didn't play JV. And I was crushed over that. I wanted to leave and go to another high school. And I knew if I went to that other high school, I'd probably start varsity my sophomore year. Well, I went to my mom and I talked to my dad, but my mom was the decision maker here. And I told her what I wanted to do. She said to me, so you want to leave your school that's very competitive and you want to go to another school and be a starter in varsity as a sophomore, and it's easier for you? Yeah. She turned her back on me and said, stay at Harding. And she walked out of the room. I was like, but Mom. She turned back and looked at me and said, there's no way in life that you're going to give up an opportunity to work hard and improve and get better at something and take the easy route. I never took the easy route. And she walked away again. That's the lesson I could have had at that point in time.
Stay at Harding.
Talking about when I was dealing with the coaching change, I had an opportunity to leave the school. I had 2 decent years, good years at Pitt. So I had a free grant to leave the school and go somewhere else. But then that kicked in again. Do I want to leave or continue the plan and continue to work hard and do what I set out to do, which was to graduate in 4 years and build a program that goes from a football school to a basketball school? When that option hit, I decided to stay and complete what I set out to do because I could do it. And I stayed.
And ultimately, that team becomes ranked number 4 in the country. I mean, you did exactly what you stayed to do. You became a basketball school there.
Mm-hmm.
We'll be back after this.
Your business phone service should not be complicated to set up, manage, and use. Nextiva connects your phone system with business apps, AI, and automation on a single platform to run your business. With their easy-to-use dashboard, you will be able to connect with your team and customers all in one place. Nextiva, powering communication across the Pac-12 and now the Corporate Competitor Podcast.
Welcome back to Corporate Competitor Podcast. It's fascinating. You and I have probably both spent a lot of time studying different leadership styles, and there are plenty of them, but most people kind of focus in on 5. One of them is that Bobby Knight dictator type style,
Right.
That I'm the general type approach. The truth is each one has its role, and there may be a time when each is actually extremely valuable for what is necessary for the organization in that moment. Learning as that person, that player that you were, to manage them and learn how to take the best of is quite an extraordinary opportunity for you to gain while you're in college.
Yeah. Don, I had a software built into 40 employees and raised significant capital for it when I retired. We had different people from different ethnic backgrounds. I had about 3 Asian women, 2 Asian males, 2 white women, 2 black women, 4 black males, 2 Russians, and 2 Indians. And I was able to build a environment where I hired the former VP of Lucent Technologies, Alfonso Hamilton. Now I'm young. I'm similarly young into business, but I understood the concept of team. And Alfonso says, you know, what you built here is what corporations have been trying to do for years. I didn't know it was significant. I was just doing what I've been known to do. And when we had lunch as a group, there's only one food in this world that you can eat as a group with all these different ethnic backgrounds. What do you think it was?
Oh my gosh, I don't have a clue. What would it be?
Chinese food.
Chinese food will go across all of them?
Across all ethnic backgrounds, because some people don't like cheese and dairy and all these different things. And you can eat vegetables and different things with Chinese food. Some people don't like meat, some do.
Right.
When you're eating as a group, the personal relationships and the connectivity and the conversation that takes place over a meal, even in a corporation, it's so important. That was so valuable to me. And that's what I learned through sports.
You know, I tell you, every one of these conversations that we get to have on this podcast, I always walk away with a handful of really great lessons that I try to put into the work that I do with my own team.
Mhm.
I'm going to order Chinese food the next time we're together.
It works.
Thank you, Charles Smith. I'm better as a result. So you leave Pittsburgh, you're drafted, you're the 3rd overall pick in the NBA draft. Incredible. Picked by the 76ers, traded to the Clippers. And in LA, we talked about making a coaching change in college. You dealt with it 5 times in 4 years with the Clippers.
Yeah.
I know your first 3 years, it was crazy. I looked at that and I was like, that's just nuts.
Yeah.
You'd taken some lesson that you referenced earlier in college about learning the 2 different personalities. What was it like when you're now a pro and you have 5 coaches in that short window?
During that period of time, each coach saw me as a different player. I ended up playing small forward, power forward, center, backup center. Gene Shue, when I came in, saw me as a power forward, but let me handle the ball. Mike Schuler saw me strictly as a power forward, and I played backup center with him sometimes. Don Casey saw me as strictly power forward. End of story. Then we had Matt Calvin for a short period of time. He put the ball in my hands and said, just go score. In any position, just score. And then Larry Brown puts me at backup center and power forward. So each coach saw me differently. Now, it's a gift that I can do all these things, and it's a curse because I don't become a master at any of them. So it taught me to be open, to work with people better, to deal with leadership in a different way, to be a bit more accepting for the greater good of the team. I didn't like it. You know, when I came to New York, I went from weighing 265 as a power forward, scoring 20 points a game, to 235 as a small forward, scoring 12, 13 points a game because my role and position changed. So I became an individual that can go into different environments with different people, ethnic background, situation, business strategy today, be comfortable and make it work.
Was there ever a point, and I'm going to guess there might have been, when suddenly a new plan is laid out for you and you just wanted to argue? Like, no, that's not the best way.
Oh, I argued with Pat Riley from the very beginning. He was trying to convince me to be a small forward. I didn't want to be a small forward because my advantage was my height, size, and quickness and ability to handle the ball against power forwards. When I lost all the weight, I felt weaker. I had to chase 6'7" small forwards and 6'6" around screens. And he taught me well how to lock and trail and do that. So I did learn a lot from Pat Riley, but I had to adapt to the position, and it didn't happen overnight.
Mm.
But it changed me as a player. You know, the play sets were different. You had to learn more. It was a challenge for me. I eventually accepted the challenge and did the best I could, and I felt I excelled at it. But I didn't like it. I didn't like it one bit.
But you still did what was best for the team because that was what you were being engaged to do.
Correct.
Pat Riley, considered one of the great coaches, one of the great leaders. He's written a bunch of books. Give me some lesson or something that you learned while watching Pat Riley lead that still resonates with you.
Pat kind of had the dictator type of mentality. He loved to push the envelope and maximize your talent the way he thought that you could do. Over the years, he learned to pull the reins back and soften that up in his coaching career because there were some key situations that had kind of made him second guess how far to push. Like when Magic Johnson pulled his hamstring when they were going into the finals, and we had some things that happened on our team, but he's great at what he does.
Yes.
The one thing that I take away from him is he was a strategic thinker and a tactical thinker. He had the ability to break our play sets down, go into practice. You two practice this piece and you get it down to a science. You three of the rest of the five practice this piece and get it down to a science. He was able to get us to communicate certain things within the play sets, 2 people, 3 people, to get it right, perfect it, and then bring it back into practice and work on it as a whole. I've seen him do that so many different times in so many different scenarios, dealing with the emotional ability of the team excelling. You know, on the way to practice, the bus would go to a movie theater where they rented it. We went in and watched the movie. But the movie was about teamwork and different things like that. So very good strategic and tactical thinker. And I learned a lot of lessons from him that I use in business today.
That's awesome. That's a neat little diversion. You're thinking you're headed to practice. Phil Jackson was known to hand out books to players, and I've heard a couple of those things about Coach Riley as well. So you also played alongside Patrick Ewing on those Knicks teams, which was a pretty neat run. Patrick was so well known for his competitive fire and considered one of the greatest centers of all time. What do you remember most about Patrick Ewing's competitive fire and how it worked to pull the team together?
There are many players that I played with: Dominique Wilkins, David Robinson, Rolando Blackman, Doc Rivers, and so many all-stars. And I can go on and on. They all had certain aspects to their game and their personalities that made them an all-star, made them great. Now, Patrick, there's a different type of leadership. Some can lead both verbally and by example. A lot of leaders are separate. Some can lead by example, some can lead just verbally. Patrick was one that would lead by example. You had others that complimented him verbally, but in his way of leading and how he thought to lead was, you're not going to outwork me. I'm the best player on this team. I'm going to outwork each and every one of you every single day to prove and show you I'm the best player on this team. And he did it every year, every practice, every play.
It's so much easier to be a leader when your best player is also the person who's willing to be your hardest worker.
Oh, he was by far the hardest worker. I can just visualize him in my mind. I mean, if there's ever a phrase, practice the way you play, he was that person. Every practice was a game for him. That's what made him great.
Wow, I love it. Now I got to ask, I live in Tallahassee, Florida, where one of my favorite people on the entire planet is Charlie Ward. You got to give me one Charlie Ward story.
Uh, so my story with Charlie is, I didn't appreciate Charlie as much as I should have when we played. Now I'll tell you why. Sometimes you don't realize certain things until it's over. Charlie was a Heisman Trophy winner. He was a Heisman Trophy winner. And to think about him playing football and then transitioning into basketball, it's amazing. He probably had the best balance of any guard that I ever seen play. His football skills and the sturdiness that he developed with his lower body, with his trunk, his ability to make strong, basic, hard, crisp passes, his ability as a guard to set a hard screen on a big man. He just knew the reaction time and how to move his body so quickly and be planted and sturdy at the right time. Just very efficient at what he did. You look back at it and you say, wow, because he was a Heisman Trophy winner. Those football drills and skills came into play in basketball, and he knew how to blend the both. That's what made him a great athlete and to sustain himself as long as he did in the NBA. Played over 10 years.
Yeah. Probably didn't run cross country, but it was pretty awesome. You know, one thing that we've learned while talking to many athletes on this podcast is some of them have struggled with the transition from a world and a life built around the discipline of sports into a corporate environment. That's central to everything you are today. What was it like navigating out of daily life as an NBA player and into a world where occasionally you had to wear a tie?
Yeah, well, in sport, you can look across at the man you're competing against, size them up, and know at the end of the day on the stat sheet who outplayed who. Versus a corporate, looking at somebody that you're working with having issues, and that the issue could be the very guy that you're smiling at every day, not knowing that he might not have your best interests at heart. How do you figure that out? that, that's the challenge. The transition was understanding culture, understanding people. The skills that I learned to be a professional athlete were probably about 10, 20% of the skills I needed to go corporate and to sustain myself there and be respected. You can't be the boisterous athlete and talk trash on the floor in a corporate environment. So it's a big change across the board. And it took a long time, and I'm still learning today. It takes a lot of mentorship. It takes a lot of humility. You have to want to learn,
I love it.
So I had a lot of personal mentors. The pastor of my church, Dr. David Ireland, who's not just a minister that you would see in that manner. He's a doctor, he's an educator, he's an engineer, so much more. I look at my mentor, who was Dr. Khalid Al Mansour, who's a business advisor and business partner to Prince Al Ali Al Tal in Saudi, who helped me travel the world. And I learned so much that I would never learn in the books with him. Here's Satch Sanders on the sports side, won all the championships with the Celtics. He's the one person in this world who can understand my transition because he played sport at the highest level and he was in business at the highest level. He started NBA programs under David Stern.
Right.
So who would know me better than someone like that? I stuck to him like glue.
Mhm.
Now, when I was coming along in business and really when I was playing, the people that I looked up to from seeing them as players, astute players, they had something about them. And then they retired and did things was Dave Bing, Julius Irving, and Junior Bridgman. They're 10 years ahead of me, right? I'm not looking to my peers to mentor me. These were guys beyond me. Now I look at where I am today, Don. Who's calling me now? But players who are 10 and 15 years behind me, still playing, recently retired. Somebody tells them about me. Now they look at my LinkedIn. Like it was great to see Kelly Oubre message me, So the transition was all about the people, understanding what I needed, understanding about what I didn't have, and going after it.
And I know in 2021, you actually joined Fierce Inc., the global leadership development and training company that changes the way people communicate with each other. We've talked about communication often in this podcast already, the idea that the best can communicate what they need from others. When you're working in this new role, how are you changing the way people communicate?
First, I had to learn for myself, and it impacted my life both personally and professionally. I had to learn, Don, the hard way and then make it easy. Have the hard conversation.
Mhm.
Think about those people that you did not have the hard conversations with that you needed to have, but you just avoided it. You put your head in the sand and you said, forget it, move on. Think about it right now. When you look at those people, those relationships are not as strong as they could be today. When you have the hard conversation, it gives you an opportunity to have a positive impact. When you don't have that hard conversation, you are destined for a negative impact with that person.
Have the hard conversations.
Yes, have the hard conversation. Don, we're on this podcast together. I can be in my best behavior because I want to impress Don. I'll never see Don again. I'll never talk to Don again. And I'll leave with an impression, and that's it for Don. But if I wanted to be accommodating and I meet someone at a place, they're going to know it because I'm going to want to learn and have that conversation about something meaningful, their culture, their dance, their person. How are you feeling? How's your family? What are you doing? That interpersonal connectivity that you make meaningful with people. If you tolerate someone at a business meeting or at a business party, you're only doing it because you know you're not going to see them anymore and you're going to leave. But what about at that point in time when you meet someone to really accommodate? That makes all the difference in the world.
I like it. Accommodation is a positive, tolerance is a negative. And if you're going to be able to have that hard conversation, that difficult conversation, it's going to be only after you've established the groundwork that's allowed them to know that you're coming at it with a pure heart, an accommodating heart.
Yes. And that's what we do. We help executives and corporations with those hard conversations.
I love it. Charles Smith, it was an honor getting a chance to spend this time with you. I loved watching your Knicks teams. I love that hard nose. That was a fun time in sports. It's been fun learning the transition for you in business. I cannot thank you enough for being with us and being a corporate competitor.
Thank you, Don, and thanks for asking the hard questions.
After a decade-long NBA career, Charles Smith knows what it means to be held accountable. He pointed out that in sports, the video doesn't lie. Our workdays aren't nationally televised, and we're not spending countless hours in the film room with our colleagues. Instead, accountability is built on trust. I leave you with one question. If you were being recorded, would you or your teammates be satisfied with the work that was showing up on film? If you could share one habit, one thing you've done consistently that allowed you to separate yourself from your competitors, what would it be? In my 30-year career, 2,500 of the greatest athletes, coaches, and leaders answered that question for me.
This is Don Yeager, who did that that article I was telling you about.
Don, Dave Sims with Coach K. How you doing?
Hey, Don. How you doing, my man? Great, sir. How are
What they gave to me is what I'm giving to you in my online course, Journey to Greatness. Through engaging storytelling and on-demand videos, you will learn the 16 habits that will jumpstart your personal growth. I will instruct you on how to apply these winning characteristics to your life through custom workbook exercises. We are slashing the price for our podcast listeners. Lifetime access to Journey to Greatness is normally $399, but for our podcast listeners, it will be $49 with the code podcast at checkout. Click the banner on corporatecompetitorpodcast.com to enroll. Thanks for listening to the show. I would be so grateful if you left us a rating and a review. We will be rolling out a new episode every Wednesday. To be the first to listen, subscribe to the podcast on our website, corporatecompetitorpodcast.com. Plus, as a thank you gift, you will receive a free chapter from one of my best-selling books on the habits of high-performing teams. Stay in touch by connecting with me on social media at Don Yeager, Yaeger, on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Until next week, I appreciate you.